Hey, my friends, it's Rachel. Welcome back to the channel. Okay, so I am seriously not trying to piss people off here, but I am sure that I am going to. Because anytime you talk about religion, or worse, leaving it, somebody is bound to clutch their pearls. So before we start, let me just say this. I am not against faith. I am all for compassion for everyone, and I mean everyone. Well, maybe not everyone. You know what I mean. There are a few exceptions who test the limits of my spiritual growth on a regular basis. But honestly, I don't care if someone's agnostic or atheist, Catholic or Buddhist, or they worship their morning coffee. I care if they're a decent human being. Full stop. And not a selfish, self-centered asshole. That is really the dividing line for me. Be kind, be decent, don't be cruel. Everything else is background noise. So then why am I doing this video? Well, I get asked sometimes why I talk more about philosophy than religion and quote philosophers more than Bible verses. Simple. Philosophy doesn't tell me what to believe or try to sell me salvation. It just helps me make sense of being human. I'm not here to argue or convince anyone of anything. I'm just sharing where I've landed and how I got here. And yes, I still believe in something bigger than me. Call it God, the universe, or just whatever keeps the stars from falling. I just stopped believing that anyone else had to define it for me. I grew up Catholic, born into it like most people are. You don't exactly get a menu. You just get baptized, handed a candle, and told when to sit, stand, and kneel. And for years, I did everything right. I went to Mass, I confessed, I learned the prayers and the rules, I memorized the stories. I tried to feel what everyone else seemed to feel. But over time, it started to shift. It wasn't like a lightning bolt from heaven or some dramatic exit. It was slower than that, quieter. A sort of inner nudge that said something here doesn't line up. The message I thought I was supposed to be learning, kindness, decency, humility, started getting drowned out by power, control, and judgment. And let's be honest, money. I'd sit there listening to sermons about humility while watching parishioners compete for social status. People would donate these big checks and somehow make sure everyone knew how generous they were. And once you start noticing that, it's kind of hard to unsee it. I started realizing that for a lot of people, not all, but a lot, religion had become more about performance than principle. I saw people being awful all week long. Gossip, arrogance, rude to waiters, mean to coworkers, dismissive to anyone who didn't look like them. But then it was okay because they went to Mass on Sunday or they volunteered at a food bank around the holidays. You could almost feel the moral math at work. I can act like a jerk Monday through Saturday because I'll make up for it with an hour or two of virtue on a Sunday. And again, not everyone. I have met people of incredible integrity whose faith genuinely guides their lives. But there are also plenty who treat it like a seasonal costume. Dust it off when it's convenient, then go right back to being who they were before confession. I started to feel like goodness was just another box to check. As long as you looked the part, you didn't actually have to be it. That's when I started to step back and ask myself, if faith is supposed to transform you, why does it seem to excuse so many people from actually changing? And here's another thing that always got to me, the cherry picking. I have heard people quote the Bible to justify love, forgiveness, equality, beautiful stuff. But I've also heard people use those same pages to justify hate, exclusion, and cruelty. It's amazing how some folks can find a verse to support whatever they already wanted to believe. Don't like a group of people? There's a verse for that. Need to feel superior? Oh, there's one for that too. And it's not just Christianity. Every major religion has its cherry pickers. Humans are creative like that. But I'll say this as plainly as I can. You cannot call yourself a good Christian or follower of Jesus or person of faith or decent human being, whatever, if you judge or hate people for who they are, who they love, what they believe, or how they live. That is not faith. That's arrogance with a choir in the background. Just because you don't understand someone doesn't make them wrong. It just means that you have more to learn. At some point, I started noticing that religion wasn't just about belief. It was about control, about who got to speak and who got to belong, who got to lead and who got to be forgiven. I felt like there was always a hierarchy, always someone deciding who was worthy. And the second you started asking questions, you were told to have faith, which, to me, loosely translated, means stop thinking. The more I learned, the more I realized that a lot of what we call doctrine is just someone's opinion from centuries ago. Man-made, written down, edited, revised, and argued over, then split apart. Every time someone disagreed with the rule, they split from the group and boom, new denomination. And yet each one still claimed to be the truth. If that doesn't make you pause, it should. It's like the world's longest freaking game of spiritual telephone. Because if there is a higher power, something infinite, beyond human understanding, how could it possibly be confined to one interpretation, one book, one building, or one logo on a sign out front? You know, for a while now, I've watched faith become less about spirituality and more about identity. It's become another team jersey, a way to show what side you're on. And that's kind of heartbreaking to me, because I think faith, at its best, unites people. It makes us softer, humbler, kinder. But somewhere along the line, it turned into a competition. Who's holier? Who's right? Who's in? It's not supposed to be a membership club with exclusivity rules. It's supposed to be an invitation to compassion. And when I saw more focus on being seen as good than actually doing good, I was done. I also started paying attention, pun intended, to how much money was involved in organized religion. The suggested donations, the building funds, the private schools, the retreats, the endless requests for contributions. And sure, a lot of churches do incredible work with that money. Some feed the hungry, house the homeless, support missions, help people get back on their feet. That is real, and it matters. But some don't. On freezing nights when homeless shelters are full, a lot of churches have their doors locked. I mean, I get it. There's an argument to be made about safety and liability, even theft or vandalism. But if a church isn't a refuge in a storm, literal or otherwise, then what's the point of all that space, all that symbolism, all that talk about being your brother's keeper? To me, it's hard to square that message with the message of love and service. And when you add up the scale of wealth involved, billions of dollars in property and assets, much of it tax exempt, it starts to feel off. That tax exemption exists for a reason, the separation of church and state. Faith is supposed to guide people, not policy, but that line isn't always respected. Some churches own sprawling real estate portfolios, entire city blocks, private universities, investment accounts, and they don't pay a dime in taxes. Meanwhile, the rest of us are funding the infrastructure that keeps all of that going. The roads, the utilities, the public services, all paid for by everyone else. I'm not saying they shouldn't exist. I'm saying it feels hypocritical to preach humility and sacrifice while sitting on billions of untaxed wealth, or to talk about service while you're locking your doors on the people who need it most. That does not sit right on me. And it's okay if you disagree with me, but I think a lot of people are starting to feel the same way. Like the balance between faith and fairness has tipped too far. When spiritual institutions start to look more like corporations than places of compassion, when the cost of salvation starts to suspiciously look like a subscription plan, maybe it's time to ask who's really being served. And the more I thought about it, the more absurd it seemed. Why would an all-knowing, all-loving creator need your credit card information or a monthly withdrawal directly from your checking account? Leaving the church didn't make me lose faith. It made me see it more clearly. And it made me free. I realized that my faith had never belonged to the institution. It was mine all along. Personal, quiet, kind of messy, very human. And when life sucker punched me, when I faced cancer twice, it wasn't the church that got me through. It was people. Real, imperfect people who showed up. friends who made me laugh, neighbors who dropped off food, strangers, total strangers who sent messages that said, "You've got this." That is what faith looks like to me now. Not rituals or pews, but connection, the human kind. Faith isn't about where you sit on a Sunday. It's about how you treat people on a Tuesday. When I stepped away from the church, I started reading philosophy again. Stoicism, Buddhism, Taoism, modern thinkers, ancient teachers. And what struck me was how universal the message was. No fear, no punishment, no obedience, just understanding. Philosophy doesn't say, "Follow me or else." It says, "Let's figure this out together." It says, "Understand" instead of "obey." It doesn't require perfection, just awareness. Every path that I have studied circles the same truth. Be good, be kind, be human. That is the whole sermon. You don't need guilt to make you moral. You just need empathy. So no, I didn't lose faith. I just changed where I put it. These days, my faith lives in people. Imperfect, messy, hilarious, resilient people. The quiet, decent ones who keep this ridiculous world stitched together. It's the stranger who holds the door when your hands are full. It's the friend who checks on you long after the crisis is over. It's the tiny, unseen moments when people choose decency over convenience, and in the way most of us keep trying to do better, even when the world makes it hard. That is what I believe in now. Not protection, just effort. And it doesn't need a steeple or a sermon to matter, because if there is anything divine left in this world, I think it shows up in our willingness to care for each other when nobody's keeping score. And that is enough to keep believing in humanity, even when religion totally disappoints you. Now, I know some people are going to hear all this and think, "Oh my God, she's lost her way." Yeah, maybe I have, but I don't think so. And if that's the case, I'm good with it. I respect people who find meaning through religion. I really do. I know a lot who live their faith beautifully, humble, generous, authentic. But I also think more and more people are drifting away, not because they've lost faith, but because they have outgrown fear. And that's what this all comes down to. The courage to question, the courage to redefine what sacred means to you. I personally don't think spirituality is about being right. I think it's about being real. Real enough to admit you don't have all the answers. Real enough to see the divine in other people. Real enough to believe that kindness matters more than belonging. So, yeah, I left the church, but I didn't leave faith. I just stopped outsourcing it. I cut out the middleman, and that's okay. Faith, to me, is how we treat each other when nobody's watching. It's the courage to stay decent in a world that keeps rewarding the opposite. And whether you pray, meditate, or just try your best not to lose your mind out there, it's all the same search for meaning. So, believe what you believe, or don't believe. Just don't be an ass about it. That is my theology now. And if you're still trying to figure it all out, welcome to the club. There are a bunch of us here. Maybe we should start a new church. Kidding. If you're still here, thanks for listening to me today. I know this one is going to stir some thoughts, and that's kind of the point. To think, not to argue. Feel free to sound off in the comments. Tell me what faith, belief, or meaning looks like for you these days. Have you walked away from something or found a new version that fits? But keep it respectful. We can disagree without being obnoxious or rude. That's kind of the whole message here. As always, take care of you, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.